The Galactic Council had never encountered a species quite like humans. Admiral Tark of the Valerian Empire stared at the footage playing on the massive screen. A lone human vessel, barely functional after the ambush, was surrounded by 3 Draconid warships. The logical response would be surrender. The rational response would be negotiation. What the humans did instead defied comprehension. They rammed their ship into the Draconid command vessel. Tark's second-in-command Vex blinked her 4 eyes in disbelief. "Yes," replied Ambassador Reed, the human representative to the Council. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaos displayed on screen. Captain Miller knew the ship was lost, so he made sure to take the enemy commander with him. Tark's antennae twitched nervously. "But that's insane?" Reed smiled. "We have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. Sometimes survival requires thinking. Outside conventional parameters, the council chamber fell silent, 23 species represented, and none could fathom the human capacity for what they termed creative problem-solving, but what any rational species would call madness. "Ambassador," began Counselor Lith, the ancient Arvanian whose species had mapped the stars when humans were still discovering fire. "Your people's tendency towards self-sacrifice confounds us. Our analysis suggests humans have a psychological flaw, an inability to properly calculate risk versus reward." Reed laughed, a sound that made several council members flinch. "With respect, Counselor, we calculate differently. Captain Miller saved the colony on Proxima B. 400,000 lives for 47 crew members. The math makes sense to us." The data crystals circulated among the council contained more examples. Humans working in radiation to save others, knowing it meant their own death. Humans charging into burning buildings. Humans who had thrown themselves on explosives. "But the neural damage," protested Vex. "Your brains release chemicals that impair judgment in crisis. You act irrationally." "We call it courage," Reed replied. "Or love." "It is a weakness," stated Mord of the Hegemony, his metallic voice cold. "The Draconids will exploit it. They already target human settlements because they know your defensive patterns are unpredictable." "Unpredictable?" Reed raised an eyebrow. "You mean effective?" Admiral Tark cleared his throat. "The statistical analysis is troubling. Human tactics defy strategic modeling. When our military analysts run simulations, human responses fall outside probability parameters 96% of the time, because you're calculating as if we value our individual lives above all else," Reed explained. "We don't. We value the group, the mission, the future." "It's genetic insanity," Counselor Lith said flatly. "Your species evolved on a death world where survival required irrational risk-taking." Reed shrugged. "Call it what you will, but consider this. The Draconids have conquered 16 systems in the last century. They reached Earth 6 months ago." He tapped a control, and the display changed to show the smoldering remains of a massive Draconid fleet. "This was last week. They won't be back." The council chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. "How many ships did you lose?" Admiral Tark demanded. "All of them," Reed said quietly. "We lost every ship we sent, but they lost everything, period." Vex's voice was barely audible. "Your people knew it was suicide?" "They knew it was necessary," Reed corrected. "The Draconids threatened our homeworld. There was only one acceptable outcome." As the council adjourned to process this disturbing information, Tark approached Reed privately. "Your species terrifies me, Ambassador." Reed nodded solemnly. "Good. Because the Draconids aren't the only threat out there, and humanity is just getting started." Dr. Alan Jones never expected to be the first human to communicate with the Mindscape Collective. As the neurologist stared at the glowing blue entity floating in the isolation chamber, he fought to keep his excitement in check. "You continue to exhibit elevated heart rate and pupil dilation," the collective observed, its voice a harmonious blend of tones. "Are these symptoms of fear?" "Excitement," Alan corrected. "Humans often have physical responses to positive emotions." The collective's form rippled. "Inefficient. Emotional responses impair cognitive function." "Not always," Alan countered. "Sometimes they enhance it." The meeting was historic. The Mindscape Collective, a species that had evolved beyond physical form into pure coherent energy, had observed humanity for decades before initiating contact. They'd chosen Alan because of his research on consciousness. "Your proposal troubles us," the collective stated. "You wish to form a neural bridge between a human mind and our consciousness." "Yes." Alan tried to project confidence despite the knot in his stomach. After the Draconid War, humanity needed allies. The collective, with its ability to process vast amounts of information instantaneously, would be invaluable. "The risk of mental dissolution for the human subject is 87.3%, the collective reminded him. "I understand. That's why I'm volunteering myself." The collective pulsed with what Alan had come to recognize as confusion. "This violates self-preservation instinct. You have offspring. Your daughter Lisa is 7 standard years old." Alan swallowed. Hard. "Yes. And I want her to grow up in a universe where humans and the collective are partners." Behind the observation glass, General Morris and Director Patel watched tensely. The military wanted this alliance desperately. The Draconids might be defeated, but intelligence suggested the Hexadominion was preparing for expansion. "He shouldn't have mentioned his daughter," Morris muttered. "The collective values pure logic." Patel shook her head. "No, it's exactly right. They need to understand why we do what we do." Inside the chamber, the collective had gone silent, processing. Finally, it spoke. "We have analyzed 12,483 human historical records. Your species consistently demonstrates willingness to risk individuals for collective benefit, yet you also value individuals supremely. This contradiction defies resolution." "It's not a contradiction," Alan explained. "It's complexity. We can hold competing values simultaneously." "Cognitive dissonance," the collective noted. "A form of mental error." "Or mental evolution," Alan suggested. "The ability to navigate paradox has driven our greatest achievements." The collective pulsed again. "The neural bridge you propose would expose us to this paradoxical thinking." "Yes. And expose me to your unified consciousness. Both sides would change." "Change is risk," the collective stated. Alan smiled. "Change is also opportunity. Your species has reached its evolutionary plateau. Perfect, stable, unchanging, and stagnant. You contacted us because you sensed something missing in your existence." The collective's blue form darkened. "We seek understanding, not change." "Understanding is change," Alan countered. "You can't truly understand something while remaining unchanged by it." What happened next astonished everyone watching. The collective divided, splitting into 2 pulsing entities, one blue, one with a hint of red. "Discord," the blue form announced. "For the first time in 40,000 years, we experience internal disagreement. Your words have induced instability." "I would call it growth," Alan said gently. The reddish form drifted closer. "We accept your proposal, Dr. Jones. But we must warn you. The risk calculation now shows 93.7% probability of your consciousness being lost." Alan nodded solemnly. "Some things are worth the risk." As preparations for the neural bridge began, General Morris whispered, "Is he insane?" "No," Patel replied, watching Alan's calm, determined face. "He's human. The mining colony on Deimos wasn't much to look at. A collection of prefabricated habitats connected by sealed tunnels. Drills constantly boring into the Martian moon to extract rare minerals. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid well." Jack Foster had been colony foreman for 6 years when the unexplained power fluctuations began. At first, they were minor, lights dimming, equipment stuttering. Then came the communications blackouts. "System diagnostics show nothing wrong," reported Mira, the colony's engineer, her face creased with frustration. "But something's draining our power." "Could be solar flare activity," suggested Tom, the geologist. Jack shook his head. "Mars is on the far side of the sun right now. We're shielded." The answer came 3 days later when the first colonist disappeared. Security cameras showed Bill Chen walking down Tunnel C7, then simply vanishing in a shimmer of light. When 2 more colonists disappeared the same way, panic spread through the colony. Earth Command ordered an evacuation, but the colony's 3 Shuttles could only take half the personnel at once. I'll stay with the second group, Jack announced during the emergency meeting. No one was surprised. It was the foreman's job to go down with the ship, so to speak. What did surprise them was when Jack added, "And I'm going to find out what's happening before the second shuttle launches." Mira stared at him. "How? We've run every test." "Not every test," Jack interrupted. "I'm going to be bait." The plan was simple, bordering on suicidal. Jack would walk the tunnels alone, wearing a prototype sensor pack developed for deep space exploration. If he disappeared like the others, the sensors might record data that would survive whatever process was occurring. "This is insane," protested Dr. Rivera, the colony physician. "You're volunteering to be abducted by an unknown force." Jack just shrugged. "Someone has to figure this out before it follows us back to Mars Central." As the first shuttle departed with half the colonists, Jack began his patrol of the tunnels. Hours passed without incident. Then, in Tunnel E3, his comms crackled with static. "I'm getting energy readings," he reported. "Unlike anything I've seen before. The transmission cut off." In the control room, Mira and the remaining staff watched in horror as Jack's life signs flatlined on their monitors. But Jack wasn't dead. He found himself in a vast chamber that couldn't possibly fit inside Deimos. The walls gleamed with circuitry that pulsed with blue-green light. "Welcome, observer." The voice seemed to come from everywhere. Jack spun around to see a tall, spindly figure with glistening black skin. Not skin, exoskeleton. "Who are you? Where are my people?" Jack demanded. "I am Nexus," the entity replied. "Your people are unharmed, merely analyzed and stored. We have waited for a sentient to investigate rather than flee. Most species merely evacuate when we begin sampling." "Sampling? This is a research operation?" "Yes. We study emergent intelligence across the galaxy. Your kind is perplexing." Jack laughed despite himself. "Yeah, we get that a lot." Nexus tilted its head. "You approached alone, knowing you would likely be taken. Your biosigns indicated fear, yet you proceeded. Explain." "Someone had to," Jack said simply. "This defies rational behavior models," Nexus stated. "Self-preservation should override curiosity." "Not for humans," Jack replied. "Not when others are at risk." Nexus stepped closer, towering over Jack. "We have studied 17 sentient species. None have willingly offered themselves as research subjects." "Then your research is incomplete," Jack said boldly. "Let my people go, and I'll tell you everything you want to know about humanity." Nexus was silent for a moment. "You would sacrifice your freedom for theirs, despite having no assurance of your eventual release?" "Yes?" "Fascinating. Your proposal is accepted." Back in the colony control room, alarms blared as 3 colonists suddenly materialized in Tunnel C7. Then 3 more appeared in the mess hall. One by one, all the missing personnel returned, except Jack. Instead, every screen in the colony displayed the same message. Agreement established with human designate Jack Foster. Colony no longer under study. Human representative remains for cultural exchange. Nexus Research Collective extends gratitude. When Earth Command received the report, they immediately classified the entire incident. Publicly, Jack Foster was declared lost in a mining accident. But deep in Deimos, Jack began teaching an ancient alien research collective about human art, music, literature, and the peculiar human willingness to leap into the unknown. The Hexadominion's ultimatum was simple: surrender Earth's outer colonies or face annihilation. After their devastating attack on New Montana that left 2 million dead, no one doubted their capability. Fleet Admiral Emma Davis stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, staring at the tactical display. The situation was grim. Earth's fleet was outnumbered 3-1. Conventional military doctrine declared their position hopeless. "Status of Project Jericho?" she asked her XO, Commander Ben Wilson. "Ready, but untested," he replied grimly. "The science team gives it a 30% chance of working as intended, and a 70% chance of catastrophic failure, possibly including the creation of a temporary black hole." Emma nodded, as if this were perfectly reasonable information. "Position? We can deploy from the Kuiper Belt. The Hexa won't detect the launch until it's too late. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what was being discussed. Project Jericho was a theoretical weapon, designed to create a cascading resonance in hyperspace that would disrupt faster-than-light travel. If it worked, the Hexa fleet would be stranded in normal space, light years from their supply lines. If it failed, the weapon could tear a hole in the fabric of space-time, potentially destroying everything within half a light year, including the Indomitable. The Hexa deadline is in 10 hours, Emma reminded them. Recommendations? Strategic Officer Ling spoke up. Fleet protocols are clear, Admiral. Experimental weapons with less than 50% success probability cannot be deployed. Noted, Emma said calmly. Plot a course to the deployment coordinates. Ling blinked. Admiral, with respect, the protocols were written for conventional warfare, Lieutenant. This is extinction-level threat. No one on the bridge disagreed. The Hexa had already demonstrated their willingness to target civilian populations. As the Indomitable moved silently through the outer solar system, Emma recorded her final log. She kept it professional, explaining her decision in terms of tactical necessity. Only at the end did she add a personal note. To my daughter Kate. Remember what I told you about the stars. They belong to humanity now. I'm making sure they always will. When the Indomitable reached the deployment coordinates, Emma ordered all non-essential personnel to the escape pods. Project Jericho requires minimal crew, she explained. The rest of you have families. Commander Wilson stared at her. You never intended to leave, did you? Someone needs to maintain manual control during deployment, Emma replied, not meeting his eyes. The computer simulations weren't conclusive. Then I'm staying too, Wilson declared. Emma started to protest, then saw the determination in his face. Very well, Commander. In the end, 5 crew members remained: Emma, Wilson, and 3 engineers. They watched as the escape pods launched toward the safety of Pluto base. Project Jericho deployment in 30 seconds, announced the ship's AI. Emma took a deep breath. Send the message to Earth Command. Operation Lighthouse is go. As Wilson began the final countdown, one of the engineers, a young lieutenant named Rivera, suddenly asked, Is this insanity, Admiral? What we're doing? Emma smiled sadly. No, Lieutenant. Insanity is thinking there's always a safe option. Sometimes there isn't. The weapon launched with a barely perceptible shudder. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then the sensors exploded with readings. Hyperspace distortion forming, Wilson reported. It's working. But something was wrong. The distortion was growing too rapidly, enveloping the Indomitable before they could engage engines. Earth Command lost contact with the Indomitable at 0347 hours. 8 hours later, the Hexadominion fleet suddenly dropped out of hyperspace, their ships drifting powerless. It took Earth forces less than a day to capture the entire invasion fleet. Not a single Hexa vessel could restart its engines. Their hyperspace capability was simply gone. The scientific explanation came weeks later. Project Jericho had created a persistent hyperspace disruption field that extended throughout the solar system. Nothing could enter or leave through hyperspace. Earth was safe, but isolated. At the memorial service for the Indomitable's crew, the President awarded Admiral Emma Davis the Star of Terra posthumously, praising her calculated risk for humanity's survival. Only a few knew the truth. The risk hadn't been calculated at all. It had been a desperate gamble by 5 humans who chose to face the unknown rather than accept defeat. The Hexa commander, upon surrender, asked just one question. Why would your Admiral sacrifice herself when the weapon was untested? The Earth representative simply replied, Because that's what humans do. Professor Marcus Wright's laboratory at the Lunar University was considered unusual even by the eccentric standards of theoretical physics. Equations covered every surface, not just the smart walls, but scribbled on paper, scratched into metal, even drawn on the ceiling. He's completely obsessed, whispered Raj, a first-year graduate student, as their orientation group toured the facility. Dr. Kim, their guide, nodded. 20 years studying the same problem will do that to you. The problem was simple to state, but seemingly impossible to solve. Why did the Mindscape Collective's neural bridge with Dr. Alan Jones create a stable connection when their mathematical models predicted failure? And why did subsequent attempts with other subjects fail catastrophically? Marcus had been Jones's colleague before the historic connection. Now, he was the world's foremost expert on human-alien neural interfaces, despite having never created a successful one. As the tour group passed his private lab, the door suddenly opened. Marcus stood there, looking disheveled, his eyes bright with the peculiar intensity that comes from either genius or madness. "Dr. Kim, excellent timing. I need a volunteer." The students exchanged nervous glances. Marcus Wright's experiments were notoriously demanding. "Professor, this is an orientation tour," Dr. Kim protested. Marcus waved dismissively. Perfect. Fresh minds. Uncorrupted by conventional thinking. His eyes scanned the group. "You," he pointed at Raj. "You look skeptical. Exactly what I need." Before anyone could object, Raj found himself ushered into the lab while the others continued their tour. "Sir, I'm just a first year," Raj began nervously. "Irrelevant," Marcus replied, activating a complex apparatus in the center of the room. "I don't need your knowledge, I need your doubt." The apparatus hummed to life. A sphere of interlocking rings surrounding a chair, reminiscent of ancient astronomical models. "Is that a neural scanner?" Raj asked, recognizing some components from his undergraduate studies. "Among other things," Marcus replied cryptically. "I call it the contradiction engine. It's based on the paradoxical nature of Jones's connection with the collective." Raj eyed the chair warily. "What exactly do you want me to do?" "Sit, think, doubt." Marcus's hands flew over the controls. "Every attempt to recreate the Jones collective bridge has failed because we've been sending our best minds. Scientists who believe the connection is possible. And that's bad? It's fatal to the experiment. The collective exists in a state of absolute certainty. When we send them another mind with high certainty, even certainty about different things, the cognitive dissonance is catastrophic." Raj frowned. "But Dr. Jones was riddled with doubt," Marcus exclaimed. "His personal logs, which I've analyzed for decades, show he was convinced the experiment would fail. He did it anyway, out of duty. That paradox, certainty of failure, yet willingness to proceed, created a cognitive state the collective had never encountered." "So you think doubt is the key to communication?" Raj asked, increasingly intrigued despite his skepticism. "Not just doubt, human doubt. The specific way we hold contradictory positions simultaneously." Marcus stepped back from the machine. "The collective contacted me last night. They want to try again." Raj's eyes widened. "With me? But I'm not—" "You're perfect," Marcus interrupted. "Young, skeptical, with no emotional investment in the outcome. Your mind naturally exists in the state I've been trying to artificially create in test subjects for years." The implications slowly dawned on Raj. "You're saying the key to interspecies communication is cognitive dissonance, the very thing most alien species consider a mental defect in humans?" "Precisely," Marcus beamed. "Our insanity is our greatest gift. The ability to doubt yet act, to fear yet proceed, to know something is impossible yet try anyway." Raj stared at the chair. "If you're right, this changes everything we understand about consciousness." "If I'm right," Marcus agreed, "it means humanity's unique contribution to galactic civilization isn't our technology or our art. It's our contradictions." The machine hummed louder. "I need your answer, Raj. The collective is waiting." Raj looked at the machine, then at the door. Fear and curiosity battled within him, exactly the state Marcus had described. "This is insane," he muttered. Marcus smiled. "That's exactly what I'm counting on." Raj took a deep breath and sat in the chair. The contradiction engine activated with a flash of blue light. In that moment, Raj understood what Dr. Jones had experienced decades earlier. The sensation of his mind both dissolving and expanding simultaneously. "Welcome," came a voice unlike any he'd ever heard. "We have been waiting for another human paradox." The colony ship Horizon drifted silently through the void between stars, its massive fusion engines cold. Inside, 10,000 colonists slept, in cryostasis, dreaming of the new world that awaited them in the Epsilon Eridani system. Only one person remained awake: Chief Engineer Laura Thompson, whose rotation in the maintenance cycle had coincided with disaster. "Damage report complete," announced the ship's AI, its voice eerily calm. "Primary fusion reactor, offline. Secondary fusion reactor, offline. Backup chemical thrusters, insufficient fuel for course correction." Laura stared at the readouts, the magnitude of the crisis sinking in. 3 days ago, the ship had passed through what appeared to be an ordinary dust cloud. It wasn't. Something in that interstellar matter had triggered cascading failures throughout the propulsion system. "Time to target at current velocity?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. 847 years, the AI replied. "Recommended action: return all crew to cryostasis and initiate minimum power protocol." Laura laughed bitterly. "And then what? Drift for 8 centuries hoping someone finds us?" The AI didn't respond to her rhetorical question. It didn't need to. The horizon was designed for a 7-year journey. Even with all non-essential systems powered down, life support would fail long before they reached Epsilon Eridani. For 3 days, Laura had worked without sleep, trying every possible repair scenario. Nothing worked. The damage was too extensive, the spare parts insufficient. Now, exhausted, she stared out the viewport at the endless stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, already too distant to see. And somewhere ahead lay their destination, a pale yellow star where a habitable planet waited. They would never reach it. Not unless... "Computer, show me the Kaufman drive specifications again." The display changed to show schematics for the experimental faster-than-light drive that had been included on the horizon as a prototype for testing upon arrival. It had never been activated. FTL technology was still theoretical, considered too dangerous to use near inhabited systems. "The Kaufman drive remains non-operational," the AI reminded her. "Activation sequence requires specialized equipment not available on board." "I know that," Laura snapped. "Show me the theoretical principles." For hours she studied the complex physics behind the drive. It was elegant in concept, creating a bubble of warped space-time that would allow the ship to effectively sidestep normal physics. In practice, every test on Earth had ended in catastrophic failure. But those tests had used automated systems. No one had been crazy enough to try manual calibration. No one had been desperate enough. "Computer, begin charging the Kaufman capacitors." Warning: Kaufman drive activation has a 94% probability of catastrophic failure based on Earth trials. Laura's hands flew over the controls. "Noted. Begin emergency revival procedure for Dr. Mark Wilson." If she was going to attempt this insanity, she needed the one person on board who had actually worked on the drive's development. When Mark stumbled into the engine room 2 hours later, still groggy from cryo-sleep, his expression quickly shifted, from confusion to horror as Laura explained the situation. "You want to activate the Kaufman drive? That's suicide," he protested. "It's never worked successfully. It's never been tried in deep space," Laura countered. "Your own papers suggested the failures on Earth were due to gravitational interference." Mark ran his hands through his hair. "Theoretical papers. Untested hypotheses." "Well, now we get to test them," Laura said grimly. "The alternative is we all die anyway, just more slowly." For 12 hours they worked, modifying the drive's control systems to allow for manual operation. The AI repeatedly warned them of the danger. They ignored it. "The field calculations have to be perfect," Mark explained as they made final preparations. "Too strong, and the bubble collapses into a microscopic black hole. Too weak, and it tears apart instead of forming a stable warp. And we have to calibrate it while standing next to it," Laura added. "Because someone had to be crazy enough to include this on a colony ship without proper control systems." Mark managed a weak smile. "We prefer the term visionary." As the capacitors reached full charge, they faced the moment of truth. "Last chance to return to cryosleep," Laura offered. "Die in your dreams instead of however this ends." Mark shook his head. "If we're testing my theory, I should be here." Laura nodded, oddly calm now that the moment had arrived. "Computer, notify me when we're at maximum distance from any star system." Calculating optimal position. Optimal position for Kaufman drive test will occur in 17 minutes. They waited in tense silence. Mark triple-checked the calculations. Laura monitored the capacitors. 1 minute to optimal position, the AI finally announced. Laura took a deep breath. Computer, if this works, how long to Epsilon Eridani? Theoretical transit time at calculated warp factor, approximately 8 hours. 8 hours instead of 8 centuries. If it worked.
Kaufman drive activation in 10 seconds, Laura announced, her finger hovering over the control. 9, 8. Mark suddenly grabbed her free hand. She squeezed back. 3, 2, 1. Laura pressed the activation control. For one terrible
moment, nothing happened. Then the ship shuddered as reality itself seemed to bend around them. Through the viewport, the stars stretched into lines, then vanished completely as the horizon entered a realm no human had ever witnessed. Field stabilizing, Mark reported, his voice tight with tension. Containment holding at 87%, 92%, 94%. Stable. Laura could barely believe the readings. We did it! It's actually working. The AI's voice cut through their celebration. Alert. Unknown spatial phenomenon detected ahead. Recommend immediate return to normal space. Before they could react, the view screen filled with swirling colors unlike anything they had ever seen. The ship shuddered again, more violently. What? Is that? Laura demanded. Mark stared in awe. I think it's a highway. The return of the horizon sent shockwaves through human space. Not because the colony ship had survived, although that was miraculous enough, but because of what it brought back. We call it the throughway, Laura Thompson explained to the packed auditorium at Earth Central. 6 months had passed since the Horizon's unexpected arrival in Earth orbit, but the debriefings and analyses continued. It's a network of FTL corridors connecting distant parts of the galaxy. The holographic display behind her showed the swirling colors of the phenomenon they had discovered. A vast web of energy pathways that crisscrossed the galaxy, invisible to normal space sensors, but accessible to ships using specific warp field configurations. Who built it? Asked Director Weber of Earth Defense. Unknown, replied Mark Wilson, standing beside Laura. But the network appears artificial, maintained by automated hubs at junction points. We encountered no other vessels during our transit. The implications were staggering. Humanity had stumbled upon an interstellar transportation system that predated human civilization by millions of years. The throughway made instantaneous travel possible between star systems thousands of light-years apart, and none of our alien allies knew about this? Weber pressed, skepticism evident. They couldn't have, Laura explained. Access requires a very specific warp field configuration, precisely the flaw in the Kaufman drive that caused all the test failures on Earth. We weren't failing. We were knocking on a door without knowing it existed. In the months since the discovery, Earth had sent exploratory missions through the throughway, mapping its connections. They found it extended throughout the galaxy, with exits near thousands of star systems, including many that had never been explored. The real question, Director Weber said, is whether the builders are still out there. That question was answered 3 weeks later, when the patrol ship Sentinel emerged from the throughway at the coordinates designated Junction Alpha. Unlike previous missions, they found the automated hub station active, its systems powering up as they approached. Captain Robert Lee's report was transmitted directly to Earth Central. Hub station responding to communication attempts, receiving universal translator signal. Message reads, "Welcome humans. Long have we waited for a species capable of utilizing the throughway without instruction. The builders extend greetings." The diplomatic team assembled for first contact included Laura and Mark, whose accidental discovery had changed humanity's destiny. As their ship docked with the hub station, anticipation mixed with apprehension. What do we say to beings who built highways between stars? Laura wondered aloud. Thank you for the shortcut, Mark suggested with a nervous laugh. The airlock cycled open to reveal a chamber that adjusted its environment as they entered. Temperature, gravity, and atmospheric composition shifting to Earth normal without any input from the humans. In the center of the chamber stood a being, of pure energy, similar to the Mindscape Collective, but with a more defined structure, a luminous humanoid form that pulsed with rainbow colors. I am Nexus Prime, it announced, its voice resonating directly in their minds. Observer of Emergent. Intelligence is for the Builder Collective. Captain Lee stepped forward. We represent Earth and her colonies. We thank you for this meeting. No thanks are required, Nexus Prime replied. You have earned your place. Out of 17,000 species we have observed, only 12 have discovered the throughway independently. Of those, only 3 have done so through what you call insanity, the willingness to attempt what your models said would fail. Laura felt a chill run down her spine. You've been watching us? We watch all potential spacefaring species, Nexus Prime confirmed. The throughway is both transportation network and test. Those who find it demonstrate the necessary qualities for inclusion in the galactic community. What qualities are those? Mark asked. Creativity, courage, and most importantly, cognitive freedom. The ability to ignore statistical probability when intuition suggests another path. Captain Lee frowned. You mean recklessness? No. Nexus Prime's form brightened. We mean the uniquely human talent for controlled irrationality. Your species embraces risk as opportunity. When your models fail, you try anyway. When the odds are impossible, you create new odds. That's just human nature, Laura said. It is your gift, Nexus Prime corrected, one the builders themselves possessed long ago. We created the throughway network when our civilization was young, before we transcended physical form. We hoped other species would evolve with similar traits. And have they? Mark asked. Rarely. Most achieve technological advancement through pure logic and cautious experimentation. They build conventional FTL drives that labor through normal space. Few possess the imagination, the inspired insanity, to knock on doors they cannot see. Captain Lee straightened. What happens now? Now, Nexus Prime said. You join the Ascendant Council, the 12 species who navigate the throughway. Together, you will guide the younger races toward cognitive freedom. And the other spacefaring civilizations? Laura asked. Those who haven't found the throughway? They continue their slow expansion, unaware of what exists alongside them. Perhaps in time they will develop the necessary spark. As the diplomatic team returned to their ship with the coordinates of the Ascendant Council's meeting place, Laura found herself standing at the viewport, watching the swirling colors of the throughway hub. It's not just about technology, she said quietly to Mark. It's about who we are as a species. He nodded. All those traits other species call defects, our cognitive dissonance, our emotional decision-making, our willingness to leap without looking, they're our greatest strengths. Insanity, a human trademark, Laura said with a smile. That's what the Valerian diplomat called us after the Draconid War. He wasn't wrong, Mark replied, but it's a trademark worth having. As their ship entered the throughway once more, humanity's future unfolded before them. A future where their unique blend of rationality and irrationality, of calculation and intuition, would reshape the galaxy. Captain Lee joined them at the viewport. Earth Central is calling it the greatest discovery in human history. Laura shook her head. It's not a discovery. It's a recognition. The builders recognized something in us that we've always known about ourselves. What's that? Lee asked. That sometimes, Mark answered, you have to be a little crazy to achieve the impossible. As the swirling colors of the throughway enveloped their ship, carrying them toward their first meeting with the Ascendant Council, Laura thought about the long, improbable journey that had brought humanity to this moment. From a lone captain ramming his ship into an enemy vessel, to a scientist bridging his mind with an alien consciousness, to a colony foreman offering himself to protect his people, to an admiral deploying an untested weapon, to a professor creating a contradiction engine, to a desperate engineer activating a drive that couldn't possibly work. Human history was written by those who defied probability. Their insanity had led them here, to the threshold of a greater community among the stars. And Laura knew with absolute certainty that this was only the beginning. After all, humanity was just getting started. The end.